Good evening. My name is John Richardson, and today is January the 13th, 2014, and this is an important day for us because this is this is our inaugural show of Independent Nation. And the purpose of Independent Nation is to get people motivated, get people educated, and get people interested in the Toronto elections that are beginning to unfold right before our very eyes. Interestingly, there was a federal by-election 2 months ago in Toronto Centre where apparently approximately 40% of the people who were eligible to vote actually went out and voted. And I can't help but to think that any candidate who could have motivated and interested the people who did not vote to actually get out and vote for them could have won. So our goal for the next year, along with my colleague, Mr. Bauman Yazdanfar, is twofold. It's first and foremost to get people to get interested in city politics and to get out and vote and make a difference. And secondly, to encourage people to actually get out and run. Offer yourself up as a candidate. It is incredibly easy to get on the ballot. All you have to do is pay $100. You go down to City Hall with identification, and believe me, they will take that $100 in any form. You can get rid of your old collection of pennies. They'll take a $100 bill, 5, 20s, anything. So we hope that you'll join us bi-weekly leading up to the October 2014 elections, where we're going to simply talk Toronto elections and get you interested, get you motivated, and give you help with running. Bauman, any introductory thoughts?
Good evening. Thank you for organizing this session. And as John, as you said earlier, we are focusing for the next 10 months to make sure that we get people involved and participate in any level, as little as going and just marking your vote, or hopefully become a candidate and run and represent your constituents in your ward.
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's safe to say that all parties are dysfunctional and only some candidates are dysfunctional. So Bauman's right. You believe you can make a difference. But I think what's also important is to understand that there is nothing magical about these people who get out and run. And believe me, if you look at who some of them have been, the jobs they've done, the positions they've taken, I think it's pretty clear that anybody can run. But in terms of very, very simple, practical advice, what's some advice you would give
Practical
somebody?
advice is very simple, as you said. Get $100, go down in the City Hall. There is 2-page application, which one page is just regulation. Another page is your name and address and point of contacts. And nominate yourself immediately. We have about 9 months and less than 9.5 months, and 9 months and 13 days, to be exact, to the election day of Toronto. And choose the area that you want to run for. And first of all, the first advice I have to tell you, immediately go and register if you are willing to do that. When you put your name on the ballot from now, then you are a candidate. You are committed, and your name is there. If you wait till September, which is the deadline for that, and in the last moment you decide to do that, you lose certain time to brand yourself. There are a lot of competition for mayoral position, but there are not too many competition for the councillors or even school trustees. So you pick your battle and go ahead. And just second advice I have for you is just have a simple blank notebook and log everything, because that will be useful at the end for you.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right on that point. Put it really simply, if you're not on the ballot, you're not a candidate, plainly and simply. So you want to get moving on that. Now, in Toronto, there are 44 wards. You can run for mayor. You can also run for a school trustee.
Of course.
As Bauman points out, as of today, did you say 22 candidates for mayor?
23 candidates, as per the website of the City of Toronto, so far registered for the position as a candidate for mayor.
Imagine that, 23. Well, that's probably a good reason not to run for mayor.
Well,
it's going to be an awful lot more difficult to be seen.
You have a point there, especially when it comes to the main media. Probably out of these 23, only 3 or 4 will be in the spotlight of the media, and the rest will not have a chance even to be mentioned.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it is incredible how powerful the media is. I mean, the media has the power, certainly, to create a candidate, to make a candidate. I'm not so sure that the media has the power, though, into candidacy. If we look at the election 2010, I think it's fairly clear that at least one of the candidates who was a front runner was nothing more than a media creation, and then of course the winner, Rob Ford, won in spite of the relentless criticism from the Toronto Star every day. So I guess it's any publicity is better than no publicity.
Of course, right? Even bad publicity is branding your name. I believe, especially with the recent issues and drama that they put through the Toronto Star about the Mayor Ford and all of those things, I think the name of the Rob Ford is being branded not only locally or nationally, but internationally.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I was in the U.S. Around Thanksgiving, and I was sitting at dinner with some people, and, when they found out that I lived in Toronto, they said, "Whoa, what's happening with Rob Ford?" And it was absolutely incredible. So, your point about bad publicity, I mean, I think that for better or for worse, the trials and tribulations of Rob Ford, the recent trials and tribulations have certainly branded him even better.
Of course, you see, one thing that most people are not aware of it because of the busy life they have is many of those voters who choose to vote in the election day, they go there and they do not have complete study or research on all candidates or even main candidates. So they usually, as a human being, just their eyes focuses on the names that is familiar. So Rob Ford is branded.
I know it's only 2 syllables as well. I mean, you don't even have to work very hard to digest the name.
Even if I remember just a couple months ago when they put the bobblehead of Rob Ford, I saw even children standing, some children in line to get his autograph. And so if children know the name, can you imagine about the adult? So no matter what Toronto Star does or any other media does, they are not really defeating him. They are helping him.
Actually, I just had a thought on that. I mean, this idea of the children there, I mean, this is probably his strategy to create a political dynasty because, I mean, lots of Torontonians, that is prior to Rob Ford, probably couldn't even name who the mayor was. And now with the, the marketing directly to the kids, I mean, just think, he's got a whole generation of people who will know his name.
You're absolutely right. Right now, even Miller name is not too many people.
No, that's a beer, isn't
it? Hey, everybody forgot about him. Nobody even mentioned that his name even is not in the paper.
Not the beer drinkers.
Barbara Hall was the mayor, but nobody remember her neither. But Mel Lastman, to some extent, because of a couple of the stunt that he pulled out, he remembered. If you talk to people, they say, okay, Rob Ford, who was the previous mayor? Many people they believe that was Mel Lastman.
No, that's quite extraordinary, isn't it? But just staying without going too far with the Rob Ford show, he doesn't need our help.
No, of course not.
I do think, though, that Rob Ford provides an interesting illustration of a problem that many candidates have, and that is running against an incumbent. As you know, or perhaps you don't know, there are term limits. I'm sorry, there are no term limits at present in Toronto politics, meaning that people can run and run and run, and they can essentially be paid by the city of Toronto their whole lives. And, I think for some of them, they regard their primary job once they're elected as running for the next election.
Well, it become a career, like career politicians in provincial and federal election from the mainstream parties, I mean, mainly NDP, Conservative, and Liberals. There are many faces and names that has been around for decades.
What's your thinking on that? I mean, do you think that, presumably you would agree that it is difficult to run against an incumbent? Would you agree with that or disagree?
Of course.
Okay, and your reason for that would be?
First, branding, and second, the face, and third, the exposure to the media. Mm-hmm. No matter, unless you are, and as you know, every election in any level, municipal, provincial, and federal, every candidate, they have a limit in the expenditure, and that expenditure has to be raised through the donations. So either you have to be very popular in your area to manage to raise, let's say, between $50,000 to $100,000 to run your election, your campaign, I mean, and even if you have that, still you are dealing is like someone in the small business tries to deal with let's say someone makes a soda pop and wants to compete with Pepsi or Coca-Cola. The same kind of the scenario against of the incumbent is there. And that is why I said the best bet for any individual who wants to get involved is to start with the counselor or the school trustee, and that there is more chance to in that.
Well, I think there's more. Yeah, there's more chance for the simple reason that A, there are fewer candidates, and B, city politics is very much a community-based thing, and I think one of the problems with running for mayor is that you have to build a constituency right across the city. Mm-hmm. But if you're running in, say, Ward 30, or by way of any example, you only need to be known and be able to get votes from that particular area. But let me ask you this. I mean, I want to stay with your discussion of the Coke Pepsi sort of example and put in the context of politics. My theory is that when you're running against an incumbent, the way voters approach the issue is whether to vote for the incumbent or to vote for somebody else. Would you agree that's the first decision?
Yes, either the first mind process is, do I like the person or I don't like a person?
Well, hold on. Specifically, though, the incumbent. In other words, my point
I'm
is
talking
that
about
I don't think that people look at all the candidates.
No. It's just the focus. The focal point is the person in the office at the present time.
Okay, so
even
do
locally.
I like Rob Ford or do I not
even
like
if
Rob
you
Ford?
run for the councillor, you look at the person who is sitting there and say, oh, do I like him or her, or I don't like him or her? So either it's for or against. Then we go to the second phase. That's not.
Which, if it's against.
If it is against,
then who do you vote for?
Then okay, what are my choices?
Right. So in other words, it really seems to me, both in terms of just the theory and the logic, but also, the sort of historical reality, that it's tough to go up against the incumbents, and I think that the larger the number of candidates who are running against that particular incumbent, the more certain it is to water down the vote.
Oh yes, your chances comes down because let's say we just again play a number. Let's say even 100% of the eligible voters vote, which is unlikely. Maybe 50 or 45% will vote. Even if 100.
Actually, if I could just interrupt you on that point for a second. This is absolutely extraordinary because it wouldn't be unreasonable to have a voting turnout of 50%. That might even be a little bit high. But what I find absolutely astounding is the level of apathy among voters has gotten so high that any candidate who could manage to get the people out to vote who didn't vote could win.
That is why we are here. We want to make sure, we want to help, not make sure, we want to help people to understand your apathy really does not working for you. It works against you, because whoever goes to that office makes policies that affect you directly. It affects your family, it affects your children, it affects your job, it affects your taxes, and so on. Now, by not voting, you are not really helping yourself. That is the whole point of I am not getting paid for this program. You are not getting paid for this program. And we are not, we could do something better, I'm pretty sure, somewhere else right now. But I am personally concerned about if right now is 40% goes to the voting booth at the election day, what happened 5 years from now? 20%?
Well, voting is definitely not on the up and up. There's no doubt about that. I think these things do go in cycles. But just speaking of politics in general, I think I know we are living in incredibly dangerous times. By that I mean that the population is ceding more and more authority to governments. Governments are getting more and more authoritarian, no matter where they are. And it's interesting because if, in fact, a small number of people vote, you're actually planting the seeds of a benevolent dictatorship at best, and out-and-out tyranny at worst. I mean, just removing the focus for a moment from the city of Toronto, what do you think of the NSA spying things coming out of the U.S.?
Well, the same thing. For instance, why do we go so far for the NSA? Go just to Ottawa with the conservative government that we have, and constantly, every single day or every single month, they come with the new laws to accommodate the United States with the information about the citizen of this country, or dual citizenship like United States citizen and the Canadian citizen, or any other countries for that matter. And that danger of the dictatorship that you said is we don't have to look in the future the way I'm seeing it right now with the demise of the Liberal Party. We are getting very close to that dangerous stage. So,
the dangerous stage being what?
Being totally under the control of the government, and government has every right to get to every venues of your life, which endangers the whole process of the democracy.
Well, that's absolutely right, and I think that basically politicians like democracy to the extent that they needed to get elected, but once they're elected, I'm sure they have basically no use for it at all.
And that is because of mainly because of the lack of participation of the public and the apathy that you mentioned as well in the first step, because many people are under illusion that as soon as I voted someone, then my responsibility is gone for another 4 years. That is not the truth.
Let's focus on that point for a second, because I think that that might be true. In other words, the greater risk of that being true if you're voting for a party candidate, for example, right? Because moving beyond Toronto politics for a moment here.
Yes.
You vote for these party candidates, and essentially their loyalty is to the party, right?
To the party and party leader and their policy.
That's right, and not to the people who elected them.
Of course not.
So, would you agree that it's the job of voters to not only vote, but to hold their elected representatives accountable?
Of course, and in 2011, when I ran in Toronto Centre, in my pamphlet, I suggested the creation of the volunteer riding association to have the authority to have their elected representative to answer them.
But you're asking voters to do some work.
Well, isn't it the price that we have to pay for democracy? Aren't you working right now? Is someone paying you right now?
Well, I mean, I think that you're right, but I think that most people either don't think about it or don't think you're right. I mean, let me ask you really simply, why do you think people don't vote? Why do you think they don't care?
Probably from my perspective and my experience knocking on doors, I found out people think, or at least believe, that their vote either doesn't count, they cannot make a difference. The politicians, which main party candidates on the MPs and MPPs are a bunch of crooks. These are kind of the things goes to their mind. And then they say, hey, why should I waste my breakfast and go and walk in this cold to the riding office to cast my vote? But what they don't understand is not voting comes back to you one way or another, and you don't even feel it till you get to the to the problem.
Well, the problem is that people don't feel they have any control over their lives, I think.
I believe they have more control than they believe they have.
Oh, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think it's totally amazing. I come back to this point. The level of apathy is so high that all you have to do is get the people out to vote who aren't voting, and you can have a landslide victory.
I give you an example. Just in recent by-election we had in Toronto Centre, 38% of eligible voters cast their vote.
It was only 38.
38. Now, if we had 68,
just before we get on to that for a second, I mean, I don't know if if anybody who's watching knows very much about Toronto Centre or not, but it's an incredibly interesting riding, largely because it spans both some of the wealthiest people in Canada, possibly in the world for that matter,
and poorest
in Rosedale, and at the other extreme, the poorest. But when I look at the by-election, I look at the candidates, and I look at the vote distribution, I have the feeling that the people who voted were disproportionately in the higher income level, and given that the voter turnout was so low, it's reasonable, I think, to say that if the voters at the lower turnout have in fact mobilized and gotten out to vote, I think they could have actually owned the results in that by-election. I'm not sure what that would have meant in terms of a winner. I'm pretty sure it would not have been the Conservative candidate. I don't think it would have been the Liberal candidate either. I had all those people voted. So, I mean, I find it absolutely amazing when all these people had to do to make their lives better. You know, the election was theirs for the taking. All they had to do was reach out and vote, and they could have been an enormous political force.
There is another side to that coin as well. You know, by participation and casting your vote, regardless of the result, you create an environment for whoever is being elected to be on his or her own her toes, to understand that there are people vigilant and are there, and they could lose that position easily. But by not participating, you give them, hey, that is because they get what in the federal election, the federal MP gets about a couple $100,000 with the perks and all of that. They say, okay, it is a check for you. And now, by not going to polling station and casting your vote, it just takes you 15 minutes or 20 minutes. What you're telling to the government is, hey, I am paying you the tax, and I am not being represented. Simple as that.
Well, you know, given the party system, the reality of federal and provincial politics, is there really anybody who's represented once the election's over, other than the interests of the parties?
Based on my experience, nobody.
Yeah, so it's, it's a fascinating thing. Yet, it's incredibly difficult to run as an independent candidate. Incredibly difficult. Hard to get media coverage.
Mm-hmm.
The candidates are often very good, but at the moment, the political process in Canada is basically what I've always called a party for the parties. And that's one reason why municipal politics is so interesting. So, Bobbin, let's imagine that you live just anywhere in the city. Why don't we say Toronto Centre?
Yeah.
And you don't live in Rosedale, and you're listening to this tonight, and you're saying, by God, yes, I'm going to make my life better, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to run for city council, if for no other reason, but they have to pay somebody, so why not me? Now, if you were looking for a riding to run in, other than the obvious, you live there, you know lots of people, what would you be looking for in terms of the best environment to be elected?
I believe the first choice is the where you live, because where you live is, first of all, you have very little criticism of if you get to the point to be noticed by media or by public. You have.
You're going to be asked the question,
you say,
where do you live?
why are you running in somewhere else if you live somewhere rather than the riding of your choice or ward of your choice in the municipal level? One thing. And second, just imagine every day you do your own routine. You go to your supermarket, you go to your coffee shop, and so on and so on. If you choose to run in that ward, your even daily activity, by increase of your daily activity, you can campaign without too much effort.
Right, you're on the ballot, you walk around, and people say, well, there's that candidate.
And you have your pamphlet in your hand, you can talk to people, and you can share your views and visions about the city, or at least in that ward. Now, if you are from another ward to go to different, from your where you live, go and run for different ward, I'm not saying it's bad. What I'm saying is you have a little bit more challenges. First of all, commuting time every day. After all, you know that the process of the campaigning is very short.
Well, not in city politics. It's not.
Still, when you want to get people excited, you go to the last month and a half, because right now not too many people even talk about that. If you notice except, as we mentioned earlier, Rob Ford. He's already submitted his papers and so on. But they don't say the 22 others.
well, that is true. Although Obama and I had the honor of meeting at least one of them the other night. But back to the Rob Ford. This is fascinating. Do you think he'll be reelected?
The way that I see the list of the candidates, of course, I believe he will be candidate.
And your reason?
We come back to those numbers. If we have 100, let's say if we have, I'm just using this in numbers arbitrarily, let's say we have 1 million votes, just for sake of discussion. And if Rob Ford has his own base, let's say 30 or 40%, doesn't matter. If he has 300 or 400,000, that means only 600,000 other votes are available to grab. If we have 22 other candidates till now, and even if we have 3 or 4 very strong candidates, that means that 600,000 will be divided among 3 or 4.
So you're looking at it logically, just
they get about 150 or 200, and because our system is first past the post, there's still 400,000 Trumps.
All right, now let's talk about that for a second. You used the phrase "first past the post," and until I got interested in this, I didn't understand anything about any of this stuff at all. Let's talk for a minute about different options for how elections might be decided. So, first past the post, and I'll lead with that one, and if I mess it up, you'll correct me. But first past the post simply means that the candidate who gets the biggest number of votes at the end of the night is going to win.
Even if it is one.
Even if it is one, if only one person voted. Now, what's interesting about first past the post is that it is entirely possible to get the largest number of votes, that is of all the candidates, but not get a majority of the votes.
That's correct.
And this is very interesting because I think that people are brought up with this idea that somehow democracy means that, you know, you get a majority of the votes. And certainly in first past the post, nothing could be further from the truth.
Yes,
Have I got
that's
that
correct.
one right?
That's correct. And in addition, media and the way they play the number, they misinform public.
How so?
For instance, when you look at the result of election, they say conservative. I'm just talking about the provincial or federal in this example. They say, okay, federal. Let's say in federal, conservative got 40% of the vote. But what they don't tell you is 40% of the people who vote. Not
let me pause there for a second, Bob. Let's actually run some actual numbers, okay?
Sure.
And let's take this slowly, because I think that if anybody's still with us, is interested this far, I think you would be absolutely astounded at how little public support is actually required to be elected. It's incredible. So let's imagine, okay, that we'll take a ward, we'll make up a mythical ward. Why not Ward 45, since there isn't one?
Okay.
But so we have Ward 45, and let's imagine that, you know, the apathy in Ward 45 is really quite extreme. Let's say, or no, let's say it's a sparsely populated ward. It's a brand new ward, and this ward has only 100 people who are allowed to vote.
Okay.
And we'll get to the allowed to vote in a minute. Now,
That's good for percentage.
all right, so 100 people are allowed to vote. Now, typically, how many of those people would vote?
Let's say they are lucky to have 50 of them vote.
Okay, so in other words, a 50% voter turnout, and by the way, I believe that that would be considered to be a victory for those proponents of democracy. So 50 do not vote.
Which is 11 now.
And now 50 are going to vote. Now, how many candidates do we have on the ballot in Ward 45? What do you think?
Let's say we make it 3 main candidates.
Why don't we just 3 candidates?
3 candidates.
3 candidates. Remember, when it comes to city politics, each of you is a main candidate. No parties.
Yeah.
So 3 candidates, okay? Why don't we call them
1, 2, 3, or ABC.
ABC. Oh, you
Okay.
want? Yes. I think they prefer letters than numbers. Okay. So now, let's have some scenarios here. How would this work? How could you get? So let's say candidate A is the winner because you know his name is at the top of the ballot, and let's say that he wins with
21 vote.
With 21 votes. Okay, excellent. Now that leaves 30. How many? That leaves
It leaves
29. Leaves 29 votes to be distributed between B and C. How do you want to do that?
Yes, B put 18.
18. Okay, and that means this one gets 11, right? Okay. So what's happening, and this is absolutely fascinating, is that actually I want to make the numbers a little different. Okay.
Sure. You can even make it 20.
I'm going to make it 22, 18, and 10.
Okay.
22, 18, and 10. Now, the first thing, so again, here's our scenario. So we have 100 people allowed to vote, 50 of the 100 vote. We have 3 candidates. Of the 3 candidates, the votes are distributed so that the winner, candidate A, got 22 of the votes, candidate B got 18, and candidate C got 10, adding up to a total of 50 votes. Now, first point that needs to be understood is that candidate A did not get a majority of the votes of the people who even voted.
No, because
Okay.
because 28 voted against it.
That's
Or
right.
half, yeah.
That's right. There were 50 votes cast. 28 actually voted against candidate A. But candidate A, by getting 22 votes, got the largest number of votes,
Yes.
and he's the winner.
Yes.
Now, the second thing that is interesting is that one could say, and this I think would be arguably dishonest, one could say that if candidate A got 22 out of 50 votes, that candidate A actually got 44% of the votes.
That is exactly the media project that.
They would do that?
Yes. Always is
Who
like
could have
that.
known? Who could have known? Yes. Okay.
So if you ask someone, He doesn't. They don't sit and focus on the ones who didn't
So,
vote.
so candidate A, could you do an imitation of candidate A's victory speech that night? What would candidate A say?
And it's very interesting that over the last 60, 70 years, you can go to YouTube from United States, here, Australia, and New Zealand. All of them come and say, I congratulate my incumbent. They put a good fight, but people, the majority of the people,
The people have spoken.
and people have spoken, and majority of them chose the right path or right venue.
Well, yeah, or they would say, and yes, let history show that tonight, candidate A received 44% of the vote.
votes.
But actually, that's very deceptive because
Yes, because actually he or she received 22% of the votes.
22, what candidate A really got was 22
out of
a
100.
possible 100 votes.
Yes.
So in other words, the truth of the matter is that candidate A, the winner, the gold-plated pension, by getting 22% of the vote.
That means 78% of
Voted
are not represented.
Well, I don't know if okay. All right, we can put it that way. I think that actually, yeah, you're right. But how about put it this way? You know, when we say that candidate A received 22% of the vote, another way of saying it might be 78% of the people did not vote for candidate A,
Yes.
yet candidate A was elected.
And candidate A's policies affect
Everybody.
everybody.
Everybody. That's right. So, geez, you think it might be a good idea to get out and vote? Because you do not want that candidate A type to be able to make that ridiculous victory speech, do you? But, you know, Bauman, we're on this topic of voting in democracies, and I know that you've been a participant in all kinds of discussions with all kinds of people on this topic over a number of years. What are some other ways, other than first past the post, what are some other mechanisms that one can use in a democracy?
I personally prefer one of the methods that being used, I believe is in New Zealand, is they call preferential voting.
Preferential voting.
Yeah, and the way it works is very simple. Instead of I make one X for one person, I make A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, or alpha, beta, gamma. Doesn't matter how you put it. I choose 3 people out of the ballot list. And if the first person, the majority, does not pass the 50% of the vote, people who vote, so in this case, in this scenario, it has to pass 25, at least get 26. If it doesn't get 26, then they go to the second stage to see if the secondary choice is less or more. So they will discard the bottom one, and then they go to the second and third and fourth, and just distribute it accordingly and proportionally.
Okay, so in other words, are you saying this is sort of a runoff mechanism until somebody gets a majority of the votes cast?
They don't have to go for the voters. They don't have to go every time to vote. They already casted their votes,
right.
So it's not inconvenience for them that 3 times they go and vote.
Okay, now that's interesting. You know what just strikes me about this is if you look at the way the party conventions where they nominate their leaders work, they certainly don't use first past the post.
Yes, actually, that is a kind of oxymoron of the main political parties, because when they run their leadership convention, they use preferential voting system.
Yes, they do.
And when it comes to the public, they use
get
the first past the post.
Voting.
So if they don't prescribe first past the post for their own party, why do they prescribe it to the public?
Well, it's like everything else. They want to keep the perks for themselves. I mean, that's like saying, why do MPs and elected representatives get much better pensions than the rest of us.
Well, that is very interesting because one of the things they probably some of the taxpayers are not aware of, a person who served, for instance, if you were prime minister of this country, even for one period, one session, you are retired with very close to $500,000 a year for the rest of your life.
Now that ought to provide those of you who are watching a reason to run for public office. Do it for the pension, if nothing else. I mean, certainly.
Listen, it's like a job interview. Many of you guys are watching, if you're watching this program so far, probably many of you either you are in the path of changing your career, path of changing your job, or looking for a job. If you just treat it as a job interview, like that show Apprentice in United States, that the people go for Donald Trump and they are there for a couple of months, run that 1 month of the campaign or 2 months of the campaign, either provincially, federally, or municipally. You can do it part-time from now. And just apply for a job. And people, the voters, will be the one who hire you. So you appeal, you run your case for people, in front of people, and ask them to hire you. Not elect you, hire you. And I'm pretty sure any one of you can do a better job than any one of else that we have right now.
So what do you think you need to do to get people's attention so they'll vote for you?
As a candidate?
Sure.
Be honest, be genuine, and be public, and be in front of their face.
How close in front of their face?
Because I was, for instance, in last couple of elections, either provincially or federally, I noticed they had number of candidates, but they didn't do much. They just sit in front of computer and they had a couple of the Twitter or a couple of Facebook, and they rely on that. You have to use all of those venues together.
All right, now let's just pause for a second.
Yeah.
You know, we do live in an age of, what I would call social media dominance. I certainly, although on the one hand, my belief is that without having a strong social media presence, I think it's almost impossible to be elected. It doesn't mean if you do have one that you will be elected. What are sort of some of the things that you used in your last election?
Well, I use social media. First of all, Twitter recently has been very popular among younger generation. I use
Why do you think Twitter is so popular? It was not 4 years ago. It's interesting, but it is today.
Because first of all, it had its phase to become a brand name and something that being used. It is easy now. It can be used by even your mobile. It's short characters. People don't have to spend so much time to read long articles like blog spots or WordPress or something like that. They are good, and you have to use it regardless. What I'm saying is not everybody wants to spend half an hour to read the whole lengthy article.
Well, I think almost nobody wants to read the whole article. I'm of the opinion, I'd be interested in your view on this, that I think that things like Twitter and Facebook, in other words, these sort of micro blogs, are actually changing the way people think and absorb information.
Of course.
Ronald Reagan, when he was president, was fond of saying, if you can't give it to me on one page, I don't want to see it. And I think we've now evolved to the point where if you can't give it to me in 144 characters, I don't want to read it.
Well, many young people, especially those who are either in a fast track of their career, or they are students, or they are in between jobs even, involved with their family raising, they can, and new generation is of course is much sharper than our generation.
No.
Because of the venues and
you speak for yourself.
Okay, at least from my perspective. But I mean, if they can grasp the whole concept in 2 or 3 Twitter reading, which takes less than a minute, and their process of their mind get engaged in the political way, that whether or not they want or they don't want, at least they had an exposure. to the idea. Yes, is it possible or is not possible? If I am for it or I am against it. But if you put a whole articles in front of them, and you want them to read it and digest it and get the meaning of that, read between the lines, then you are dealing with a big hurdle right now with the society that we have with the younger generation.
So what do you think people want out of their politicians?
I think the main thing they want to be a little bit of the transparency, a little bit of the honesty.
Respect?
Respect is subjective, but at least if they are transparent, at least they know what they are facing. Most people don't know what they are facing. They just go and put an X, and the guy or girl goes to the Queen's Park or Parliament, and then you don't see them till next election. Mm-hmm. You maybe get a couple of the newsletters when they need you.
Well, you get you don't get the newsletters because they need you. You get the newsletters because they use their term in office to market themselves for the next election. Is why.
Well, that is the need they want. They're building their brand
building their brand
for the next election.
Interesting. So, issues. Finally, issues. What would be an issue in the city of Toronto?
Like any place else in this nation, in this Canada, in lovely Canada that we live in, the main issues right now is housing, the cost of living. I'm talking about the necessities, like a hydro, like a food, like a transportation, and the condition of the services available to those who are in special needs. Mm-hmm. These are the major issues. So it comes back to the job, economy, housing, transportation, and special needs.
In other words, the necessities of life.
The necessities of life. Nobody asking for the luxury, nobody asking for why I am not a millionaire. They just want to have access to basics so they can focus in their life, in their families. And unfortunately, our councillors and our politicians are not providing that. They are just yanking at each other and just playing their own drama in the city hall, which we witnessed, especially in last year or so.
Just the last year?
No, I mean, last year it has been more than past. Mm-hmm. Usually it always been there, but in last year, with the help of Toronto Star, of course, and the star of Rob Ford, we have seen it in a higher volume.
You know, it seems to me, and I'm obviously to a large extent expressing my own bias here, but it seems to me that the single biggest that one issue that's big enough in this city to unite everybody in the sense that at least they recognize it's an issue would be the public transit issue. Would you agree or disagree?
Of course, because it is the artery of the commuting that makes a person to have more access to a job, which it helps to the issue of the job and making some money for their living, and that helps to the issue of the economy, as well as being able to get to your medical appointment or anything that is needed health-wise. So, and that helps to the issue of the necessities of the life.
You know, I read recently or heard recently, I'm not even sure where this was, that Toronto, or the GTA, is now the sixth largest city in North America, which surprised me a little bit. But whether it's the 6th or the 10th largest, it's a huge mass of humanity now. The main arteries in and out of the city are clogged unless it's between about midnight and 6 in the morning. I mean, that's the only time you can get anywhere reasonably quickly. In fact, in 2010, and I presume this is still up, the Toronto Board of Trade actually tried to quantify the cost of the gridlock.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember the exact results, but I mean, but it was but the cost that they put, the drag on the economy in Toronto, was absolutely enormous. Why isn't City Council and the people of Toronto, why are they not behind the idea of biting the bullet and expanding the subways?
Well, as you said, the city of Toronto by itself, GTA, has 2.5 million population, and with the people that comes from the outskirts of the city, inside the city for work and so on, we're looking at about 4 million during the daytime. And we have number of we have Mississauga Transit, we have North York Transit, we have Vaughan Transit, we have Orange and Viva, and then we have TTC. City with this magnitude like GTA, first of all, need one universal transit system, and it has to be operated efficiently in order to minimize those costs that you mentioned, mentioned by Board of Trade, which is in billions.
Do you know, by the way, that there was a time when there were a number of independent bus companies in downtown Toronto? You know, that were all basically
I
amalgamated.
heard of that, but I never seen that.
Well, it was definitely before your time, Bauman.
Yeah.
But it's actually, I think, you know, as you identify the same kind of thing going on now with, say, Mississauga Transit or Vaughan Transit, and trying to feed this into the TTC. But my question to you is this. Why, it doesn't seem to me that there's a lot of will on the part of any city council in recent memory, or even the population of Toronto, to really bite the bullet and expand the subway system.
Well, I give you an example that is probably funny. When I arrived to Canada in Toronto 28, 29 years ago, within the first couple of years, just within year one or year two, I was hearing the idea of running a subway through the Shepherd Lane. Mm-hmm. That was 27, 28 years ago. In 27, 28 years, you wonder, with all of this research, millions of dollars here for this research, for that research, for this estimate, for that estimate, you might assume, if you were not living in this country, in 28 years, you must be able to put all sorts of the different lines of the subway in this city.
Do you know that China built a whole new subway line just for the Olympics a few years ago?
Yeah, in 3 years.
Yeah, I actually wrote a couple of years ago.
In 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
In 3 years. And here we have councillors from time of the Barbara Hall, Mel Lastman, which amalgamated, the city was amalgamated, David Miller, and Rob Ford. All of these people, along with the 44 now, it used to be more councillors in the past, all of these people spend millions of dollars of taxpayers every day, go to City Hall and bickering to each other, debating, do we want over the ground or under the ground? And I think there is a sense of the corruption is there, because I think two sides of the argument are trying to get their own buddies, their own cronies, to get the contract of building. From my point of view is, there is a group that they are dealing with a certain contractors that they want to get the underground, and the other side of the argument is there are people who are dealing with the contractor who wants to get above the ground. So as long as these two are fighting with each other, who is the loser in between? Public. And that is why it's important people get involved, either themselves as a candidate or to vote and keep their representative alert that they are watching and they are holding them accountable.
Okay, well, on that note, why don't we wrap it up for this evening?
Sure.
And we will be back to talk about these
In 2 weeks.
issues and new issues that will certainly arise 2 weeks from tonight, the 27th of January. And once again, my name is John Richardson, and this is